So let's take a look at the origins of the short story, just to kind of see where this developed. It's pretty recent, the short story, compared to the novel. I talked about Boccaccio and Chaucer, the Decameron and all that from earlier times on, but that was just an example of inside of a novel, or just inside of a larger book. But talking about a short story as something by itself is an isolated form, didn't really develop till later on. We've got these stories, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, which were compiled by Charles Perrault. And we've got Arabian Nights also around that same era. But it wasn't until the 19th century when the short story was recognized as a common literary genre. Stories like, I remember when I was young, my favorite were The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle. I think there's a bridge in New York named after one of these. Anyways, so Edgar Allan Poe really took it to the bridge here with some of his poems, or some of his short stories. Maybe when you were younger, you read these when you were in school, or maybe even on your own like I did. The Pit and the Pendulum was my favorite. So those were the early ones, and they developed into other international authors, Maupassant, Turgenev, Chekhov, Arthur Conan Doyle. These 19th century short stories were primary realists, especially because they coincided with the literary movement of realism. But today, the genre is so diverse, you can't put them all in one basket. But this is just an example of where these things came from. So even though they're all different and, the ones today, it's so diverse, there's still some characteristics which most of these short stories share.